I was smiling through a charity gala when my childhood bully shook my hand and said, "I've heard such wonderful things about you." She had no idea who I was. Then her future mother-in-law stood up with a microphone, and I whispered in her ear. That moment didn't happen because I woke up one day and decided to become cruel. It happened because some people leave damage behind them and still get to walk away clean. When I was a kid, everyone knew me as Melissa. I don't use that name anymore. Not really. I started using Grace in my adult life, partly because it was my middle name, and partly because Melissa belonged to a version of me I had spent years trying to bury. Back then, I was quiet in the wrong way. Too nervous. Too unsure. Too easy to corner. I wore whatever my parents could afford, kept my head down, and tried not to draw attention to myself. That never worked. Ashley noticed me early. She wasn't the loud kind of mean. She didn't have to yell or shove anyone to make them feel small. She was smarter than that. She knew how to say something just soft enough that adults missed it, but sharp enough that everyone our age understood. If I walked into class, she would wrinkle her nose and glance at whoever was sitting beside her. If I sat down at lunch, someone suddenly had to move. If I answered a question wrong, she would smile and say, "It's okay." Not everyone gets things right away. People laughed because it sounded harmless. That was her talent. She made cruelty sound casual. By middle school, she had turned me into a joke without ever needing proof of anything. She told people I smelled bad. She said I lied for attention. She said I was obsessed with people who barely knew me. None of it had to make sense. It only had to spread. And it did. I started eating lunch in bathroom stalls because at least a locked door gave me a few minutes of peace. I learned how to unwrap food quietly. I learned which hallways to avoid. I learned how to keep my face blank while my chest felt like it was caving in. My parents knew I was unhappy, but they didn't know the full truth. I gave them small pieces because I could see how tired they already were. My mother worked long hours and still came home worried about groceries. My father fixed whatever broke in the house because calling someone else cost money we didn't have. I didn't want to become another thing they couldn't afford to fix. Then we got Jack. He was a scruffy golden dog from a rescue, with one ear that stood up and one that didn't. He followed me everywhere. If I cried, he came to my room. If I sat on the floor trying to breathe through a panic attack, he pressed his head against my knee and stayed there. For a while, Jack was the one part of my life Ashley couldn't touch. Then she did. One summer afternoon, I heard him barking outside. Not his normal bark. A scared one. I looked through the front window and saw Ashley near our fence with two other girls. They were tossing small stones toward the yard, laughing every time Jack backed away. I ran outside and yelled, "Stop it." One of the girls looked embarrassed. Ashley didn't. She leaned against the fence like I was bothering her and said, "Relax. We're not even touching him. You're scaring him." "Then bring him inside," she said. Her voice was flat, almost bored. I brought Jack in and locked the door. He shook beside me for a long time, and I remember being angry in a way that felt too big for my body. But there was nothing to report. No broken window. No injury. No adult would have cared about a few stones near a fence. That night, Jack got out. The side gate had been latched earlier. My father always checked it because Jack liked to wander if he had the chance. But sometime after dark, the gate was open. Nobody admitted touching it. Nobody had to. Jack ran toward the main road. We heard tires before we found him. I won't describe that night more than that. He was there, and then he wasn't, and after that something in me stopped trusting the world to be ordinary. The next day, my mother made me go to the community pool because I had been crying so hard she said I needed air. I was sitting alone near the edge when Ashley walked past me. She slowed down just enough for me to hear her. "Maybe things will smell better now." Then she kept walking. No witnesses. No proof. Just one sentence low enough to disappear if I repeated it to anyone else. But I knew what she meant. And she knew I knew. After that, school wasn't just miserable. It felt unsafe. My body started reacting before my mind could talk it down. I would wake up nauseous. I would shake before walking into the building. Some mornings I made it through first period, then spent the rest of the day locked in a bathroom, trying not to cry loudly enough for someone to hear. Ashley noticed that too. One day in the hallway, she looked at me and said, "You always look like you're about to fall apart." I didn't answer. She smiled. "It's intense." That was how she made it worse. She turned my fear into something embarrassing. Like I was performing it. Like I was choosing to be weak. Eventually, I stopped going to regular school. On paper, it was a practical decision. A different path. A quiet change. The truth was simpler. I broke. I finished later, away from everyone. I stayed home more than I should have. I became very good at being alone. And Ashley kept living. She went to parties. She smiled in pictures. She got praised by teachers who thought she was charming and mature. She moved through the same town like nothing had happened, while I was still trying to understand why my own body acted like danger was always close. That was the part one couldn't forgive. Not just what she did. The ease afterward. The moment I was old enough, I left Tulsa. I didn't leave dramatically. I packed what I could, told my parents I needed a fresh start, and moved far enough away that I could breathe without expecting to see her face at the grocery store. For years, I rebuilt myself in small, boring ways. Therapy. Work. Routine. Learning how to sit in restaurants without checking every exit. Learning how to speak in meetings without hearing laughter from a hallway that no longer existed. I changed too. I grew into my face. I fixed what I could afford to fix. I changed my hair. My clothes. My voice even. I stopped introducing myself as Melissa. Grace felt cleaner. Not fake. Just separate. By my late 20s, I looked like someone who had survived a life no one in the room could guess. I thought that meant the old story was over. Then, at a charity gala in Baltimore, I heard Ashley laugh. It wasn't loud. It wasn't special. But my body recognized it before my mind did. I turned and saw her across the room, standing beside a man named Gregory. She looked beautiful in that polished adult way some people master early. Soft smile. Elegant dress. One hand resting on his arm like she had practiced belonging there. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. Then someone brought her toward me. "This is Grace," a woman from the committee said. "She's helping us with the campaign." Ashley turned to me with a warm, perfect smile and held out her hand. "I've heard such wonderful things about you." Her eyes passed over my face with no recognition at all. I shook her hand. "It's nice to meet you," I said. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. Maybe if she had recognized me, things would have been different. Maybe if her smile had flickered, if she had looked ashamed, if she had even hesitated, I would have walked away and left the past where it was. But she didn't. To her, I was just Grace. Useful. Polished. Safe. Melissa was gone. That should have comforted me. It didn't. Over the next few months, Ashley and I kept crossing paths. Same meetings. Same fundraisers. Same planning calls. She had attached herself to Gregory's family foundation, and she was trying hard to look like she belonged in that world. Gregory clearly adored her. He was careful with her, proud of her, protective in that quiet way men can be when they think they have chosen someone fragile but good. His mother, Sharon, was harder to fool. Sharon was never openly rude. She was too controlled for that. But she watched Ashley with a kind of polite suspicion that made every conversation feel like an interview. Ashley felt it. I could tell. She began pulling me closer because she thought I was outside the family politics. Coffee after meetings. Private complaints. Late texts. She treated me like the one person in the room who didn't want anything from her. That irony almost made me laugh. One night, after a long planning session, she said, "You're one of the only normal people around this whole thing." I said, "That sounds exhausting." "You have no idea," she said. But I did. Not in the way she meant. The more time I spent around her, the more cracks I saw. Ashley was under pressure, yes. But pressure doesn't create character. It reveals it. She wanted the wedding to be perfect. She wanted Gregory's family to accept her. She wanted the foundation circle to trust her. She wanted her daughter, Anna, folded into that world like none of the messy parts of Ashley's past had ever happened. And she was spending money like she was trying to buy proof that she belonged. At first, it was just small comments. A credit card she joked about hiding. A bill she said could wait. A nervous glance when Sharon asked about budget reports. Then I saw the foundation numbers. They didn't line up. Not in a dramatic way at first. That was almost what made it believable. Little gaps. Odd timing. Payments that had been shifted. Reimbursements that didn't make sense. Small choices someone could explain away if nobody looked too closely. But someone did look closely. Me. I didn't break into anything. I didn't invent evidence. I didn't steal records. I paid attention to what crossed my desk, checked public information, compared dates, and noticed patterns Ashley clearly thought nobody would connect. Around the same time, Ashley said something that made the past feel suddenly close again. We were in her apartment after a meeting, both of us pretending the conversation was casual. She had been drinking slowly, staring out the window like she wanted sympathy before she even started speaking. I wasn't always a good person, she said. I looked at her. She gave a small laugh. I mean, who is? I was awful when I was younger. My hand tightened around my glass. She kept going. There was this girl back then. I don't even remember everything, but I know I was horrible to her. I asked, did you ever apologize? Ashley blinked, like the idea had never fully landed. No. I wouldn't even know where she is now. Then she shrugged. Hopefully she got over it. Hopefully she got over it. I stared at her face and understood something I had not wanted to understand. She remembered enough. Not every detail. Maybe not Jack. Maybe not the pool. Maybe not the exact sentences that still lived in my head. But she remembered hurting someone and had filed it away as a youthful mistake. A flaw in her old personality. A story she could tell over wine to sound self-aware. I said, people don't always get over things just because the person who hurt them moved on. She looked at me, searching my tone. Then she smiled sadly. Yeah, I guess that's true. But she didn't really hear it. People like Ashley rarely hear pain unless it threatens them. After that night, I stopped pretending to myself that I was only observing. I began documenting. Quietly. Carefully. Only what was real. I checked everything twice. Amounts. Dates. Vendor names. Foundation reports. Expenses that seemed personal. Statements Ashley had made in meetings that contradicted the records. The picture was ugly, but it was not complicated. Ashley had been moving money around to cover herself. Maybe she planned to put it back. Maybe she told herself it was temporary. Maybe she was desperate. None of that made it clean. For a while, I sat with the evidence and did nothing. I wish I could say that was mercy. It wasn't. It was timing. The biggest gala of the season was approaching, hosted by Gregory's family. Ashley was helping lead it. Sharon would be there. Donors would be there. The foundation board would be there. I sent Sharon an anonymous message with the records she needed to begin asking questions. No threats. No dramatic speech. Just enough truth to make denial impossible. That could have been where I stopped. It should have been where I stopped. But I wanted Ashley to feel uncertainty before the truth arrived. So I sent a few anonymous messages to her over the next couple of weeks. Short ones. No insults. No lies. Just little reminders that the things she thought were hidden were starting to surface. One said, the foundation numbers are being reviewed. Another said, you should tell the truth before someone else does. The last one said, the full picture is coming. Ashley began unraveling almost immediately. She called me late one afternoon, voice thin. Can you meet? I found her at a quiet coffee shop. She looked perfect from a distance and terrified up close. I think someone is trying to ruin me, she said. I asked, why would someone do that? She stared at me. For 1 second, I thought she knew. Then she looked away. I don't know. It was the weakest lie she had told me. She started talking in pieces. Sharon hated her. Gregory wouldn't understand. The foundation was complicated. She had meant to fix things before anyone noticed. Everyone expected too much from her. I listened. At one point she whispered, do you ever feel like your whole life is built on a floor that could crack any second? I looked at her hands shaking around the cup. Yes, I said. I know that feeling. She mistook my answer for comfort. That happened a lot. By the week of the gala, Ashley trusted almost no one. She suspected assistants, board members, donors, even people who had nothing to do with the foundation. But she didn't suspect me. That was the part one still don't fully understand. Maybe I had become too different from the girl she hurt. Maybe she had never really seen me clearly enough to recognize what survived. The night of the gala, the estate looked unreal. Warm lights across the lawn. White flowers everywhere. Music low enough to make every conversation sound important. Ashley arrived beside Gregory, smiling like her life depended on it. Maybe it did. Anna wasn't there, which I was grateful for. Whatever else happened, I didn't want a child in that room. Before dinner, Ashley found me near the terrace. You came, she said. Of course. She glanced towards Sharon, who was speaking with 2 board members near the front. Does anything feel weird tonight? Ashley asked. I studied her face. She was pale under her makeup. Her mouth kept tightening at the corners. Her eyes moved too quickly. You seem nervous, I said. I just need tonight to go smoothly. I almost felt sorry for her then. Almost. Dinner began with the usual performance. Toasts. Polite laughter. Glasses raised. People pretending wealth made everything graceful. I ended up seated close enough to Ashley that I could hear her breathing change whenever Sharon looked in our direction. That was how I knew. Sharon had read everything. Ashley knew she had read everything. And the room kept going anyway. A man nearby laughed at something harmless. A server cleared plates. Someone asked about the flowers. Life has a cruel way of staying ordinary right up until it doesn't. Then Sharon stood and reached for the microphone. Ashley went still. Not startled. Still. Like her body had finally understood what her mind had been refusing to accept. She whispered, "Something's wrong." I turned toward her. For 1 second, all the years between us collapsed. The hallway whispers. The bathroom lunches. The pool. Jack. The sentence she had dropped beside me like trash and forgotten. I leaned in close enough that only she could hear. Maybe things will smell better now. Ashley looked at me. Really looked. Confusion crossed her face first. Then irritation. Then something sharper. Recognition. Her lips parted. "Melissa?" I sat back. At the front of the room, Sharon began to speak. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Sharon had the kind of presence that made people quiet down because they sensed something formal was about to become serious. "Before we continue," she said, "there are financial questions connected to this foundation that must be addressed." The room shifted. Not loudly. Just enough. Heads turned. Hands paused over glasses. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Ashley stood too quickly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said. Her voice cracked on the last word. Gregory turned to her. "Ashley?" Sharon stayed calm. "Then this is the right time to clarify it." Gregory looked at his mother. "Can this wait?" "No," Sharon said. "It has waited long enough." That sentence changed the room. Ashley began talking too fast. Temporary mistake. Miscommunication. Pressure. Reimbursements. Records she could explain if people would just stop staring at her. The more she spoke, the worse it sounded. Gregory's face slowly changed. That was the moment Ashley saw his trust slipping. She reached for him. "I was going to fix it." "Fix what?" he asked. She didn't answer clearly. That was answer enough. The collapse wasn't some dramatic movie scene. It was messier and sadder than that. Ashley cried. Denied things. Admitted things by accident. Blamed Sharon. Blamed pressure. Blamed a world that expected her to be perfect while never once acknowledging that she had chosen every lie now closing around her. People looked away, but not quickly enough. A board member stepped in. Someone from the family's legal team asked guests to give them privacy. Gregory tried to speak to Ashley quietly, but she was too far gone into panic to hear him. "I did everything for this family," she said. Sharon's voice stayed low. "No, you used this family's name to protect yourself." That landed harder than any shouting could have. Ashley broke down after that. Not violently. Not dangerously. Just publicly. Completely. In the center of a room she had wanted so badly to impress. She was guided out through a side entrance before the night was over. I stayed near the terrace doors with my hands clasped in front of me. I expected triumph. I expected heat in my chest. Instead, I felt quiet. The fallout moved faster than I expected. The foundation opened a review. The engagement was paused, then ended. Ashley lost her position, her social circle, and the future she had been trying so hard to secure. Gregory did not make a public spectacle of it. That almost made it worse. He simply stepped back, handled things through lawyers and family channels, and stopped protecting the version of Ashley he had wanted to believe in. Brian, Anna's father, filed for emergency temporary custody after the gala. He had enough reason to argue that Anna needed stability while everything was being sorted out. He got temporary custody. Not some permanent fairy tale ending. Not a clean punishment handed down overnight. Just a serious legal response to a mother whose life had become unstable in a very public way. Ashley moved out within weeks. I did not contact her again. I did not send more messages. I did not tell Gregory who I was. I let the truth keep moving without me. A few weeks later, I drove back to Tulsa to visit my parents. On the way out of town, I passed the street where Ashley grew up. I didn't plan to stop. I didn't even know if she would be there. But she was. She stood in her parents' yard wearing an old sweatshirt, arms folded tightly across her chest, staring toward the road like she had forgotten what she was waiting for. For a second, I saw the girl from school. Then I saw someone else. A woman whose perfect life had cracked open in front of everyone. I slowed down. She looked toward my car. I don't know if she recognized me through the window. I don't know if she cared. I kept driving. That is the part some of my friends can't forgive. Not the records. Not the gala. Not even the whisper. The fact that I saw her after everything and felt no need to stop. When I finally told a few close friends the whole story, they split almost immediately. Some said I exposed someone who was already lying and let consequences land where they belonged. Others said I made it personal and that made me wrong. One friend said, "You could have reported it and walked away." She's right. I could have. But walking away was what I had been doing since I was 13. I walked away from lunch tables, from hallways, from classrooms, from a name that felt like it belonged to someone permanently humiliated. And Ashley walked away from all of it too, except she did it cleanly. She carried none of the weight. She got to call it a phase, a mistake, something from when she was young. I don't think that excuse works forever. I don't think childhood cruelty becomes harmless just because the cruel person grows up pretty and learns how to speak softly. That doesn't make me innocent. I know that. I could have handed over the records without ever making sure she knew it was me. I could have stayed clean. I could have chosen a version of justice that didn't include one whispered sentence from the past. But when Ashley looked at me in that room and finally understood who I was, something inside me settled. Not healed. Not erased. Just settled. For years, she had been a ghost in my life. A voice in my head. A face I hated myself for remembering. That night, for 1 second, I became a real person to her. Not a joke. Not a rumor. Not a weak little girl who cried too easily. A person. And maybe that is why the whole thing still feels complicated. Because I don't regret exposing the truth. I only wonder what it says about me that I needed her to know who handed it back to her. Maybe that makes me cruel. Maybe it makes me human. Maybe it makes me exactly what happens when someone survives long enough to stop being afraid. So now I'm left with the question everyone keeps arguing about. Did I go too far by making sure my childhood bully finally faced the life she built on lies? Or did she only fall because the truth finally caught up with her?